Part 5 in the Run Chart series is regarding data collection. For your information, these are the references that have been used to inform this presentation, particularly the 3 books highlighted in the images. To create a chart, you'll need data. So, do you already have some data that's ready to go? Or is the data elsewhere and you'll need to extract it? Or the third option might be that you'll need to collect data from scratch. So to collect data from scratch, you may need to conduct either an audit or a survey. So an audit of a process or review of information, or survey of relevant consumers using a questionnaire. The design of your audit or review or survey is critical to the robustness of your data and therefore your quality improvement project. To collect data from scratch using an audit or a review, what you may do is observe a process or review a sample of medical records or electronic medical record information reports, investigate incident data, or you may even assess compliance to a policy, protocol, or a guideline. If you're going to use a survey, you may want to survey staff or patients or family or carers using a questionnaire. But please note, you will need to get ethics approval from your organisation if surveying patients, families or carers. New South Wales health staff have access to a system called the Quality Audit Reporting System, or QARS. So they can use this to collect and report on either their audit data or their surveys data using a questionnaire. So for New South Wales health staff, they need to register for the QARS system through their local health district or network. And the QARS system log-on is on the CSE website. We'll now discuss how you can set out your raw data. If you collect your data via the CSE QARS system, the data will be automatically summarised and reported. Otherwise, when you collect your data, you'll have what we call is raw data, and this will need to be sorted, summarised and interpreted. The raw data can be placed in either a table, which you might want to draw by hand, or into an Excel spreadsheet or a database, or maybe into a statistical program such as Minitab, SAS or SPSS. The traditional layout of data in a table is that you have the cases in the rows and the variables in the columns. So in this example here, we've got variables going down in columns and the cases going across in rows. And regarding the Privacy Act, please make sure you comply with this act and ensure that all the data is kept de-identified. For example, don't use patient names in your data set. Another consideration when you collect your data is to work out if you'll do a retrospective or prospective review. So retrospective review is when you look back in time at events that have already taken place. So a retrospective audit might be where you pull medical records and review past patient cases to collect your data. Or you might download a report from the electronic medical record or the incident management system or other IT systems to get your data. The benefit of a retrospective review is that you can obtain the data you want very quickly. In other words, you don't have to follow a cohort for months and months to collect your data. So you could actually obtain all your baseline data today. The disadvantage of retrospective reviews is that you may not have all the data or criteria that you want, say, documented in the medical record or documented in the reports. So that is when you'll need to collect the data prospectively over time. You also need to be aware, just because something is not documented in the medical record or in the electronic medical record or in the incident management system does not mean it did not happen. Prospective data collection is when you collect the data from patients as they present for treatment, or collecting the data on events as they occur. So you can start the data collection from this point forward or at a future date. The benefit of prospective data collection is that you can collect data on very specific or rare criteria or information that may not be a normal data field in the electronic medical record or the IT system or the incident system, or it may not be criteria that's normally documented in a medical record by the staff. A disadvantage of prospective data collection is that it may take many months to collect your data, particularly baseline data, and this may require many staff to collect the data as well, so you've just got to watch for inter-rater reliability issues. Another consideration when you're planning to collect your data is your measure of occurrence. Are you going to collect it via, say, incidence or point prevalence? So what are these measures of occurrence? So incidence is the number of new incident cases during a specified time period, such as a month. Whereas point prevalence is the number of current cases, and what we mean by current cases is new and pre-existing cases at a specified point in time, in other words, on a particular day. We'll now look at some examples of incidence as a measure of occurrence. So remember, this is the number of new incident cases during a specified time period. One example might be an incident proportion, such as the percentage of post-operative infection incidents per month. The calculation for this is the number of post-operative infection cases for the month, which that's the numerator, and it's expressed over the number of post-op infection cases for the month plus the number of patients without a post-operative infection for the month, and that's the denominator. Also, you can express it as an incident rate, and that would be the number of fall incidents per 1,000 occupied bed days per month as an example. The calculation in this case is the number of fall incidents for the month, which is the numerator, and it's expressed over the occupied bed days for the month divided by 1,000, and that's the denominator. An example of point prevalence as a measure of occurrence. Again, point prevalence is the number of current cases, both new and pre-existing, at a specified point in time, in other words, on a particular day. An example might be the percentage of patients with one or more pressure areas or pressure ulcers on, say, a given day like the 25th of May. And this data can be gained from an audit of all patients in the hospital. The calculation here would be the number of patients with one more pressure areas found on the audit on the 25th of May. That's your numerator, and it would be expressed over the number of patients with one more pressure areas found on the 25th of May plus number of patients without a pressure area on that day, and that's your denominator. We'll now do a refresher on numerator and denominator. So to create a percentage or a proportion, you need data for the numerator and the denominator. So the numerator is the top part in a fraction, and the denominator is the bottom part in the fraction. And hopefully you'll remember from Year 6 Maths that D equals down as denominator. The numerator is the count of the number of defects or incidents for a time period. And the denominator is the number of defects or incidents plus the non-defects for the same time period. So in the example of the percentage of post-operative infection incidents per month, the numerator in this case would be the number of post-operative infection cases for the month, and the denominator would be the number of post-operative infections for the month plus the number of patients without a post-operative infection for that same month. In other words, the total of patients. You can document the measurement strategy for your quality improvement project using a form such as below. You can spell out things like the type of measure it is, the name of the measure, the operational definition, how you plan to collect the data, and how you plan to report and the format and frequency of your reporting. Now I'm going to look more closely into the measurement strategy and the titles of each column. So the type of measure, this is where you'd state whether it's an outcome, process, or balancing measure. The operational definition, this is where you would state the exact definition of what you're trying to measure, and if relevant, state what is included and what is not included when collecting the data. Also, if relevant, clearly define both the numerator and the denominator. And data collection, what you document here in the form is how we collect the data, and if relevant, state how you would collect both the numerator and the denominator data. Also state here where the data is. Are you going to get it from a computer system or a register, or you need to do an audit or a survey to retrieve the data, to gather that data, such as a medical record audit. And if you're a New South Wales Health staff member, consider using QARS for your audit. Also think about who will collect the data and do they fully understand the operational definition, and check for inter-rater reliability when you collect your data. Your data collection tools, do you need to develop data collection sheets or tools or Excel spreadsheets to collect the data? And also remember to pilot test or PDSA these tools and methods. So will you do retrospective or prospective data collection? So in other words, will you collect your historic data, so retrospective or baseline data, or are you going to collect the data day by day, which is prospective data collection? Measure of occurrence. You're going to report it as an incident rate or a point prevalence rate where relevant. So an incident rate, remember, is the number of new cases in a time period, whereas point prevalence is the number of cases on a given day. It's a bit like a census. Sampling, will you review all cases or will you do a random sample? And when will you collect the data? So when do you plan to start and finish your data collection? Are you going to do it next week, next month? When do you want to start? And check with your data, will it be reliable, accurate, honest and relevant data? And PDSA, so think about always pilot testing your data collection tools and methods. And the last column in your measurement strategy is reporting, such as the format and frequency of reporting. So you need to consider here what type of chart you'll plot your data in and how often you'll plot the data in the chart. And for a run chart, it's best to report frequently, in other words, every week or every fortnight rather than quarterly. And you need at least 10 data points before you can interpret the data. Think about who you report the data to. Is it your project team? Is it the sponsor? Is it others like the executive? And when will you report to your sponsor or team? Is it weekly, fortnightly, or monthly? This is the end of this section in the Run Chart education session. Please go to the next part of the Run Chart series to learn more and to complete the quiz at the end.